Welcome to the show, Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron Show. In today's episode, we will consider church organization. We pray you will continue and study with us. Thank you for tuning in to the show, Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron Show. This podcast is dedicated to addressing various topics from a biblical perspective, coupled with practical solutions for daily application. In essence, we want to take the Bible, which is relevant for all that we need in this life and the one to come, and we simply want to make it plain. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, and also Habakkuk 2:2 are two of the passages that drive our show. As always, we want to give you guys our contact information so that you can reach out to us. We absolutely love hearing from you guys. It does us good when we open our email and we see contact from our audience. But our email address is makeitplain.hab22 @gmail.com. And I promise you, one of us will contact you. It may take a little while, but I can promise you one of us will contact you back. In today's episode, we are going to address church organization, or the biblical structure of church leadership. And so more specifically, that's kind of what we're going to cover. But because church organization can look several kind of ways, it can look several different ways. And before I turn over to you guys, I want to kind of, because there's no layman's term definition that we would give here, because we're not defining terms, so to speak. Like, church organization is what it is. It's how our church is organized. And so when we're talking about church organization, I want to talk about, I first want to set forth some states in which congregations can be organized or can be.
Some examples, probably.
Yeah, they can be, but are they all right? I guess that's what I'm saying. That though they can be, we're not saying that all of these are proper structures, but these are some of the structures you will see
That exist, right?
Some examples
basically, in a nutshell.
Some examples that exist.
Yeah, some examples, but here are four states.
Right.
Here are the four states you're typically going to see religious body exist in. One is going to be what we would call unscripturally unorganized. And in that state, the organization of that particular religious group, they won't have any biblical authority for the people or the position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they won't have any Bible, for example, a pope, right? They're not going to have no Bible for that. To be the vicar of Christ. Like, you're not going to have any Bible for that. That's going to be unscripturally unorganized. But then you have unscripturally organized. So you don't have authority for the person, but you do have authority for the position. For instance, elders. Like, we have biblical authority for elders in the Bible. However, we don't have biblical authority for a woman to be an elder.
Right.
So that's how we would define unscripturally organized. Then we have scripturally unorganized. So we have authority for a person, but we lack some positions. For instance, we have authority for there to be a preacher, but the congregation may not have other biblical positions such as elders or deacons. But then finally, here's God's ideal.
Absolutely.
This is the way God would have it be. And it's a great thing that God didn't say it must be, because then we'd be in trouble. But God's ideal is that congregations be scripturally organized. That is, the person is authorized and the position is authorized. So having said all that, let's talk about it. How would you guys talk about, how would you talk to someone about biblical, scriptural church organization?
With me, I will say, it has to start from the Bible. If you can't
Amen.
see, we have to have the standard.
We talk about that all the time, though.
All the time. The standard is what it is. A congregation should be striving to become scripturally organized.
Because that's the ideal.
That's the ideal. So it's I would never tell a congregation, well, you need to shut your doors because you don't have this.
Because that's all I'm about to ask you. Let me ask you a question, Keith. So is it wrong if a congregation will God not accept a congregation that's in that third state of being scripturally unorganized?
I don't think they will be wrong, because you have to give people time to grow.
Right.
You got to learn. People
I agree
have to
with
get
you,
to
by the
that point. But I will say this: some congregations may have been around 100 years and never had elders. Now that concerns me.
Right.
You get, and I know 100 is kind of out there in years,
Right.
but even 30, 40, you think about it. If a congregation goes so long and they've never had elders, one has to really ask themselves, like, what's going on? Is it being taught on? Where I preach at, we don't have elders from when they was at Water Street or to now at Auburn Hills. And we get talks about elders pretty frequently, and it's something that needs to be on the mind of everyone. One of the saddest things that I heard a brother say to me one time, it doesn't matter if you have elders, just get you some good men and everything will be all right. Well, that sounds like God doesn't know what he was talking about then. Like that was a very damaging statement. And that's a very damaging mindset to have as a Christian when it comes to having that organization.
But just to kind of mention what that brother said, not only it shows the ignorance of a brother, but if you got to get good brethren, that means you don't even have good brethren.
Yeah, who determines what good brethren are?
So I'm saying, like we're saying, good brethren qualifies the elder, but if you got to get good brethren, man, you in a bad predicament. If you got to get good brethren, just get some.
Y'all know as well as I do.
Uh-oh.
Let's be honest about this. If I was preaching at a congregation that didn't have elders, and they had men that were able to qualify,
Right.
Especially if they're not, hindered or arrested by the marriage, divorce, remarriage position, and they can qualify. Man, sermons, Bible classes, I am preaching to get the church organized. Like that would be my primary objective. If I took a work at a congregation that didn't have elders, that would be my primary objective. But y'all know as well as I do. Y'all know as well as I do what this stuff morph into.
No, absolutely.
The one man pastor system,
or
the preacher controls the church,
or
controls
leading
everything,
brethren,
or leading brethren.
Mm-hmm.
Leading brethren. I've never seen that term.
And leading brethren. Now, I want you to think about this. And again, please hear us out. We're not trying to offend anyone, but it's just to educate. If you don't qualify to be an elder, what gives you the authority to make decisions in the Lord's church if you do not meet the qualifications for an elder? And I know we say, oh, well, we just got to put men in there. God has never done anything by a majority vote.
Right.
And that's what I see. A lot of the brethren, they say, hey, we're the leading brethren of the congregation, so let's majority vote to this.
What are the qualifications for lead brethren?
Man, I need some script. I need some script on it because here's what you run into. So what are you saying? Because I've had to have this conversation with preachers and members. So preachers and members will contact me and say, Brother Garner, I'm having this situation at our church, and preachers will do that too. They'll contact me, hey man, what's your view? What's your thoughts? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm gonna give you Bible. That's all I can give you. I'm not qualified to do nothing but give you Bible. Mm-hmm. So does the preacher have authority? I mean, there has to be an aspect of authority that the preacher has.
Absolutely.
Based on Titus 1:5. Mm-hmm. If he did not have authority, he could not set in order the things wanting.
And in Titus 2:15, these things speak, exhort, and rebuke with all authority.
All authority.
Titus 2:15.
So, but that's where the authority is.
Mm-hmm.
So you have men and preachers who believe that this pastoral system, he's the head of, even if they have elders, because they have this power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
They have this power struggle. And so we know things like that, but just like you stated, Key, pastoral systems and leading brethren, this stuff can morph into that, and it causes obviously more confusion, more problems than it will ever solve.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about church organization, what are we talking about then?
Well, I would just add to that is, like if you think about the word structure, like structure indicates purpose. Like for example, like a house is a structure, but what's the purpose of a house? To live in, to dwell in. What's the purpose of what's the structure of an office building? To work in, to get stuff done. So when we're talking about structure, we're talking about purpose. So as it relates to structure in the church, God has a purpose for offices.
Right.
You know, with elders and deacons and preachers. But like you were saying though, you know, if you have these different structures that not even God came up with, you know, you could just, man, you could just have so many different variations of just so many different things that are just wrong. Because you're talking about you know, having, you know, this pastoral system.
Right.
And we've seen even in our brotherhood, the other end of that spectrum where you had evangelistic oversight.
Right.
So it's like, man, you could go to either extreme,
Sure,
but you have to go back to God's pattern for his organization.
to the extent that even in our brotherhood, we know that preachers are carrying the title pastor.
Absolutely.
And it's very denominational.
Right.
Like they carry it because they want to be denominational. You know,
And
that's if we're honest, and I wish they would be honest.
Right.
But they won't be honest.
And now you got, you know, first ladies.
Yes.
Ladies.
Yes. Well, that we've never seen in the Bible.
Absolutely.
And if we're honest, and if they'll just be honest, just say, well, we want to be denominational.
Call it
That's
what it is.
Call it what it is. That's right.
I've
You know,
I've shared it
you're
with
only saying what we already know to be true.
Right.
I've shared it with you guys. I've shared it with many people. When you like you said a while ago, you can't start off wrong and end right.
Right.
What's going to end up happening? And I'm not a prophet, not the son of a prophet, or anything like that, as they say. But when you look at these systems,
Because I think in a previous episode, God said that the prophet time was going to end. So I don't know.
I'm definitely not one. But I can see I study behavior, and I can see the way that a lot of things are going. You're going to have, because of these unscriptural setups, you're going to end up having women co-preachers. You're going to end up having, like, it's going to lead down to those things, because if one thing goes, if I can set leading brethren, that means I can put sisters to do things. I mean, I can rewrite the whole system.
Because that's when I asked the question,
Right.
when is too far, and who makes that indication?
Right. You've never seen throughout the history of humanity, from Adam to this very point, where we can contain sin. We can, where you can contain unrighteousness.
Yeah, no, you can't.
You can't, man. It's like, if you start down this path, man, it's like an avalanche.
You in and of yourself are powerless to do it. That's why you need Jesus Christ. That's why you need the blood.
Right.
Like,
So,
because you can't.
Right. And here's the thing: if that wasn't the case, how did we get to this point where we're at right now in terms of church organization?
Why are we even talking about it?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Why are we even talking about it?
Yep.
Yeah. So if we're talking about church organization, well, let's talk about it biblically. Obviously, one office is going to be elders. Now, that is an office that is stamped and ordained by God. When we talk about 3 divine institutions that God stamped with his approval, the first would be the family, Genesis 2:24-25. The second would be government,
Romans
13, 1-7.
Right.
And the final one would be the church,
Absolutely.
Matthew 16:18. Like, God stamped these organizations with his approval. Now they can be unstructured. That doesn't mean he didn't stamp the entity itself. Like, okay, so you can have a family. It can be comprised of 2 women. It can be comprised of 2 men.
Right.
It can be comprised of 1 man and several women. I mean, you know, but that don't mean God approves the people that make it up. But the family itself, the idea of the family
structure.
The family structure, God did it. But
that nuclear family.
Yeah, the entity, the idea of family, God, government. Evil people make up governments.
You're right.
But God ordained them. He would like them to be righteous.
Law and order.
Right.
You know.
Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. The church. Evil people make it up. They unstructure it.
Right.
You know, and so that's not God's ideal, though he stamped it with his approval, the idea of the church.
As you say that, you think about even in the first century with apostles, you had men like Diotrephes.
Yeah, that wanted to be.
You know, trying to run the church in a situation, in an organization that God, man, Diotrephes was kicking people out, man.
Right.
But you don't have that today, though.
Yeah, no. You don't have it today, huh?
Not today.
So when we talk about elders, we're talking about an office that is ordained by God, that has interchangeable words. I know, you know, some people don't quite understand, but an elder is words that interchange with elder are bishop, 1 Timothy 3:1, Titus 1:7, overseer, Acts 20:28, pastor/shepherd, same word, Ephesians 4:11 in the Greek, presbyter, 1 Timothy 4:14. All of these speak to the same man, but just different aspects. Elder is age. Bishop, overseer, his oversight. Pastor, his leading. Presbyter, the plurality of him and in the office. So that is the biblical structure.
Right.
Because when we talk about a plurality of men, that meet qualifications set out in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 8, Titus chapter 1, verse 5, 16, if it were God's ideal that the church would have a pastoral system with one man over the church, why in the world would Paul, toward the end, he and Barnabas, toward the end of the missionary journey, first missionary journey, Acts chapter 14, verse 23, why would Paul go back and ordain elders in every church? Right. They ordained elders in every church. Why would they do that if it was okay for the church to just have a local evangelist? Right. Why would Paul go back to those churches of Galatia and establish elders in every church?
And why would he tell Timothy to ordain elders? And Titus. They're already in the office of preaching. Right. But he was like, no, this not it.
Okay, so having said that, Cam, the churches were still wanting. They had preachers.
Right. Yep.
He said set in order things wanting. In order and
right.
Ordained elders in every city as I'd appointed thee.
Right.
Well, Titus was there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me in the first century that this disciple of Paul was not qualified.
Both he and Timothy.
And Timothy. That's what I'm saying. He and Timothy. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but Paul would still say those things.
Yep.
And so, when you consider that, man, it's hard to argue.
If elders was needed then, they're still needed now.
And we're talking about an age of inspiration.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about an age of miraculous. Like Paul said, no, y'all need some elders, man.
And even when,
but we have brethren that are saying, no, we good.
Yeah, it's. And if you think about that, and even when we have elders, making sure we have qualified elders. Right. There are a lot of times, and the sad situation we see that people just come into it. Hey, man, we need an elder. Man, I think I can do that.
Or they give good.
So they're good businessmen. Or it's the majority. Hey, I just like him. That dude right there, like
he's just popular.
He could be a good elder. Man, I promise you, you do not want to go to hell through the church.
Or just for sake of having an eldership.
Absolutely.
Just say we got one.
It's so interesting when you think about, biblical elders. Key mentioned having men who are actually qualified to be elders. Man, those qualifications are there for a reason. It's amazing when you start, you hear members talk about, especially the office of elders. Well, you know what, man, man's a good guy, man. Good family, man. Oh, okay. But it's like for example, man, we drive, right? There's certain criteria that you have to meet in order to drive on the streets of America. Like just because you got a nice car.
Right. just because you're a good family, man. Just because you're a good family, man.
Man, you have to you have to be able to see.
Yeah.
It's all of it is important.
It's like you can't just negate the fact.
That might be debatable as we drive on these streets.
Man, it's like that criteria is there for a reason, man. But people want to, ignore those things just to put a man in office to say we got it.
But as a subsequent thought, the very same things that qualify can disqualify.
Right.
Let me just put that out there.
We all have a mutual friend, and he's trying to work at a congregation, and elders told him what they expected him to do. And when he asked them the question, well, what are you guys going to do? And they said, hey, well, we have jobs that keep us away for a long time. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah. And
I would have ran away from that congregation so fast. Right. I'm like, because if I got to do my job as the preacher and I got to do your job as an elder, that doesn't sound fair. And that doesn't sound like eldership that is putting the flock first.
No.
If I'm always gone, if I always got something else to do, I got to work another job. So we're going to leave it all in the preacher's hands. Those men should not be elders.
And actually in this episode, we're not actually addressing their actual works. But man, when you see those lines blurred, because I have been there.
Because it is a work.
I have been there where those lines get blurred. And you just like, elder want to be the preacher. The preacher is a deacon. The deacon is an elder. You just like, you know what I'm saying? Right. Like all these lines are blurred, and then we wonder why there's conflict between the elders and the preachers and the deacons because everybody don't understand the roles. And this episode is not about that. We're just talking about, the four structures of organization.
Whether it's preacher, elder, deacon. I mean, as we know, the Bible calls them offices, but that works. Like, it's qualifications.
If a man is out of office, he's desired the good work.
Right. These are responsibilities that, if multiple men want to be in the eldership, they have certain things that they're supposed to do in that regard.
Right.
Preachers have certain things they have to do in that regard. Deacons have certain things, so they have to. Everybody got to stay in their lane.
Right.
And do what God has called them to do, so we can work together effectively.
But when the lines, I see it all the time.
Absolutely,
the lines get blurred. But then the second office deacon, because we're just talking about the structure, the organization right now. Deacons, and two of the most common words used for deacons, in the New Testament are diakonos, one who executes, carries out a command. The word translates minister 18 times. Servant 6 times and deacon 5 times. Then you got diakonia, and that means that's more of a one who you got one who executes commands, but then it means to serve or service, and it's the word that translates ministering, or it's the action, administration, serving, service, but even when you find those qualifications in 1 Timothy chapter 3, when Paul leaves off discussing elders and begins discussing the office of deacons, here's one great thing about what Paul says is that they need to understand they have purchased to themselves a good degree.
Right.
They have purchased to themselves a good degree. And men who meet these qualifications, as you was talking about earlier, Cam, like you can't just be like, give me a license. I think I deserve one.
Right.
This is not, and I'll learn to drive after you give my license. This is not on the job training. No, you must be already. You would have already exhibited these qualifications before you get into the office. You can't just be like, well, I think this person be a good elder or a good deacon, so we'll put them in there. And they can learn as they go. You don't learn how to drive as you go.
We don't do that. We don't do that in any other sector.
Anywhere. We don't do that
give me the doctor that ain't never been. Ain't never no clinicals, no studying.
Right.
But he just woke up this morning and said, you know what? I want to be a doctor.
Right.
Let's do surgery.
Right.
You know what, man? When I was little, we used to go to Chuck E. Cheese, and we used to be in those airplanes, flight simulating games. Man, I could fly a plane, but put me in the real plane.
I'm not getting that with you.
Can I transfer my ticket, please?
But I say this about deacons though, man, and because we a lot of times we put emphasis on preachers and elders, man. But think about this, man. When was the last time you heard somebody say, man, when I grow up, I want to be a deacon. I want to be a deacon. Like, the work of deacons, man, is special, is important.
It is.
And we ought to promote and push for men to be faithful and godly and effective deacons, just like we push for preachers and elders.
Right. Because that's why, and I've seen some elders that would probably be better as deacons because elders have to be apt to teach. And I've witnessed some elders who cannot handle the word properly.
Right.
But simply because of their age, they feel like they're more an elder role. But when you consider Acts chapter 6, if you consider that prototypical, I'll leave that up to the universe to debate. But one thing you can know is that these deacons labor under the oversight of some kind of leadership.
Absolutely.
Like if you don't disseminate anything else from that, like they labor under the oversight of some kind of leadership. And we know based on the office, it would be the elders. They serve the church. They serve the Lord.
Even deacons got to be able to uphold the mystery.
Yes, they got to uphold the mystery.
Right. So it ain't just you doing, you ain't just outside picking up cans and cutting the grass and cutting the hedges. Man, you got to be able
to defend the truth, defend our Lord. And both offices are mentioned in the church, which is so crazy why you would have churches be like, no, we straight. But then Paul said in Philippians 1:1, the elders and the deacons, the bishops and the deacons.
And you know what I like about Philippians? Like Philippians 1:1 talks about bishops and deacons.
Right.
But then when you get to Philippians chapter 2, verse 25, he mentions the Epaphroditus as their fellow servants. So the church of Philippi, based upon my studies, had bishops, deacons, and they had a located preacher. Right. So we talking about God's structural organization. Ideally speaking, God wants his church to have Ministers, preachers, evangelists.
Well, you know, Colossians 4, and then Philemon, Archippus.
Right.
Archippus was the preacher at Colossae,
Right.
which, if we are rightly dividing God's word, met in Philemon's house.
Yeah, very possible.
Because Trophimus and Onesimus brought the letters from Paul to Colossae, both letters, right? That'd be around Colossians chapter 4, verse 10 and following. So, but Archippus was there, and all indications is that he was the located preacher.
Right.
So, was Timothy in Ephesus? And was Timothy in Ephesus when Paul wrote to him?
Or was he sending them? Because First Timothy 1:3, you know,
Right.
as I besought thee to abide still
still
at
at
Ephesus. When I went to Macedonia.
So he was at Ephesus,
Right.
right? When Paul was at Macedonia.
Right.
Was Timothy preaching there? Was he preaching there? I don't know, but it seems that preachers were in locations. It doesn't mean that they didn't move
Right.
at times,
Right.
you know, but
Yeah, you bring up a good point with that too, because there are some congregations of God's people who don't believe in having a located preacher,
I know. Yeah.
Mhm.
and that's and I always thought that was a little bit odd.
Yeah.
well,
Paul was
even,
in a place 3.5 years.
well, even when you get to Acts 8,
Right.
you know, at the persecution of Stephen, you know, like the church
Yeah.
moved, but the apostles stayed in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You know, so like,
Well, you know, Paul was in Ephesus for 3 years, you know. So, but then we have preacher evangelists. Again, we're just talking about the organization. We're just talking about the structure. So we've got elders, we've got deacons. Up until this point, we have not been able to provide any passage about leading brethren. So we have preacher or evangelist, which would be the last one. You know, most common words for that are diakonos, again, servant,
Right.
1 Timothy 4:6. And then you got preacher, kerux, which is a heralder,
proclaimer.
proclaimer of divine truth. 2 Timothy 1:11, Paul would tell Timothy. And then you've got evangelist, euangelistis. It's a proclaimer of good news, 2 Timothy 4:5. So all of these words are the same word for the preacher: minister, preacher, evangelist. Just kind of, because the evangelist eulogizes. That's what an evangelist does.
Right.
They eulogize. He preaches the good news. Right. That's what an evangelist does. He evangelizes. He preaches the good news. Which, by the way, when somebody preaches your funeral and they give a eulogy, by definition of word, they got to say something good about you. So you know, but his work is summarized 2 Timothy 4, 1-5. We got about 20 seconds here. Y'all got anything y'all want to add to that? So we got elders, preachers, and elders, deacons, and preachers.
I would just say, you know, and it's unique to the fact that, you know, like none of these words and terms and identifications refer to women.
Right.
None of them. That's a very important point to point out, because now we have many who are trying to make it be so.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm gonna end it at.
Well, listen, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Make it plain, hab22@gmail.com. Please email us. We'd love to email you back. Thank you for tuning in. May God bless you and keep you as you seek to conform your will to his.